Hello and welcome to the Poor Hammer Podcast, episode 51. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
Recently, we've been asking both people on the YouTube community thingies and the patrons what kind of episodes they'd like to see. And this got brought up a couple times, was the question of how about an episode on how to pick your second army? That's a stupid question without any extra context.
Luckily, we're brilliant people and we can answer it anyways.
So, without any further ado, let's jump into this unanswerable question and answer it.
Sounds good.
So, Eric, do you know why I decided to do this episode this week instead of just going with one of the other suggestions?
Because you're gonna get another army started?
I already did.
Brilliant. What'd you go with this time?
So you know how in our group chat I had been talking about wanting to do Genestealer Cult, like super grimdark stuff? I just went out to the local store and just bought Start Collecting box, a couple characters, and some extra abominants, or aberrants rather.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, it does kind of feel like it's more of like an art project for you, because it's got a lot of like kit bashing and stuff like that you were playing around with, so. But that's still dumb. I mean, you're not even done with all the ones that you currently have, though, right? Like, you still have a pile of shame.
First of all, screw you. Second of all, Necrons are tabletop ready, though some of them are very sad.
I was like, I don't know about that, dude.
Some of them are just tabletop ready and need to be finished. Drukhari, I am currently, literally today, I've been posting pictures in the Hobby Talk on the Patron Discord. I've been finishing up my covens, which I had put on hold when I finished my big project of getting the other two parts of the army finished. I was like, I'm burnt out and I don't want to half-ass my coven.
Yeah, fair.
So I finally am painting those because I'm making that like my big current art project and it's really fun. I am trying to also stick to themes. So Necrons was mostly like my first army, learning how to paint in general. Drukhari was I am going to use contrast paints and figure out contrast paints and like just do that really well.
Yeah.
Compared to me, not really well compared to people on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, you're a gorilla.
Yeah.
But it turned out well,
and
I'd say.
It has. So I've been going back because the new contrast line came out earlier this year. I've been going back to using contrast on this Coven army, which is hard because I've been using oil paint so much with Thousand Suns to do washes and stuff. Going back to using fucking Nuln Oil, oh my god, it's miserable. I can't go back after using oils. Then Chaos Knights are halfway primed, sitting in my brother's basement still, but that's kind of their eternal suffering. I did have him 3D print me some nice basing material for them, which are going to be like nice, what's that rock that turns into hexagons? Basalt. So they're like basalt pillars that I'm having him 3D print for me, and I'm going to turn them into like a mutation on my Thousand Sun basing scheme. And I've got a couple Thousand Sun characters that are just like very lightly tack glued to their base because I didn't know what to do with the base.
So instead of tactical rock, it'll be tactical basalt.
Yeah, but it's going to be like big ass throne of basalt pillars, like not just one little dinky rock here. Like, so that's what I'm going to do for all that, which is pretty exciting. But yeah, the Knights is like when I feel it, I work on it. And it basically got screwed last time because I felt it. And then we started remodeling my brother's basement. So they're half primed.
Yeah.
They're functional plastic though, so it doesn't matter. Thousand Suns are completely done other than the stuff that's probably never getting painted that's technically sitting in a box still, but I'll see that in 5 years.
That's fair.
So really the only thing that's not painted that should be is Chaos Demons, but Chaos Demons.
Be'lakor.
My Be'lakor will probably get painted, honestly. It's just my love for that army is in tatters right now. I just need a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
That codex. Oof. I do think if I do any of my Chaos Demons this year, which is unlikely if I start a new art project, I'll probably paint up like my Khorne part of the army because I'm pretty happy with that in the new codex, honestly. And I've got some sweet ideas for Khorne. I think my main problem with Khorne is I'm torn 3 different ways on doing their colors. And I have enough Bloodthirsters that I could technically like split it all into thirds and do 3 different colors. But I don't know if that'll look crappy when they're all on the table together. if it's just like a base tying them together.
I have no idea on that one. I mean, it's chaos, so it'd probably be okay.
I don't know what I want to do with my corn, but that's the part of Chaos Demons I'll probably paint first.
So what you're saying basically is it's been so long since you've tried to figure out your second army that you no longer understand what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a really good, timely episode to do, as I just randomly bought an army.
Nice.
But there is reason behind every one of my purchases, army-wise. Most of them are lack of impulse control, but there are other ones.
I'm not sure that lack of impulse control is a legitimate reason, but I mean, we'll hear about the reasons that you justify after buying it.
Yeah. So let's get back on subject, and we'll weave that information into this episode.
Okay.
Let's start things off. What are the reasons you would buy your second army?
Because you hate your first one?
It's honestly, that's very common.
Yeah.
It's your aborted projects, your abandoned, halfway done first army. You're allowed to make a mistake and not fall to sunk cost fallacy and keep playing a bad army. If you don't jive with an army, don't be afraid to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those that, like, it's a hobby about having fun. If you don't enjoy playing that army, don't.
Yeah.
Like, it's a certain point where, like, sunk cost fallacy is hard to get out of, especially if you're on a budget. But if you're not having fun, you're not having fun. So try and do something about it. You know?
Yeah. I would say the most common answer is wanting variety from your first army.
Yeah.
This is the most complex for us to answer. It's the one that you probably came to this episode hoping we would answer, and we will later, but we'll hit all the other answers first. A side part of that is wanting more simplicity or more complexity, depending if you feel underfulfilled or
Overfulfilled?
or overstimulated by your army.
Yeah, I mean, that does kind of, like, part of variety, but I see what you're saying of, like, not just variety, you want a play change or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'd say another one is an art project. Like,
That's actually a pretty big one, I think, especially because after, like you said, the first one was trying to figure out how to hobby, especially if you haven't done building and painting and hobbying type stuff. If this is like the first real time you're getting into it, that first army is making all of the mistakes to learn so that you can have, like, oh, I can do so many new cool things that I learned on the first one. Just do it on the second one.
and that's not to say you can't upgrade your paint scheme on your first army or fine tune it over time or just hard change to a different paint scheme, whatever. All of that is doable, but often people want the refresh, the let's just start clean again. I want to try this other type of art project. Whether it's, hey, I want some waifus. I'm sick of painting Skelly boys. Or
I'm not sure Warhammer 40k is the proper spot for waifus, but
it can happen. You could be playing sisters. You could be into witch cults. I'm not, but
you could be into orcs.
you could be into orcs. So you might want an easier painting scheme. Like maybe you just absolutely despise your first army is miserable to paint and you're jealous of everyone else with their painted armies and you just want something easier.
Yeah.
Maybe the aesthetics of the army start calling to you after you've been exposed more. Like you feel like, oh, I liked my army at first, but now I know that's my calling over there.
I think that is a big one of, like, as you're more and more into the hobby, it's easier and easier to see more examples that other people have done. And that can inspire you to do new, different aesthetics that you might want to try.
And I would say this game is actually really bad for letting a new person see things. This is hard to describe.
The box art is not particularly great at capturing the, like, potential.
So, like, that's only part of it. We have people, like, one of the patrons wanted to get into Warhammer, who comes from our Magic side of things, and was like, hey, I'm looking to get into Warhammer. Where can I go to just look at all of the armies and figure out how they play? They wanted an equivalent of, like, in Magic, you can go look at all the Magic cards on like one of 30 different websites that have all the rules text, all the art. You can click through artists to see different arts from the same artists and all of this information. And the answer in Warhammer is like, go on the Games Workshop website.
And like look through some of the subreddits.
And it's hard because it's like, there's no organized place to be like, here, you want this website where you can go to each army, click it, and you can click on each single model in that army's range and then see a billion different pictures of how different people painted them or anything. There's nothing like that. I think that gets into like the evolving taste for people who got into their first army and are looking to like course correct their tastes towards what they really wanted.
Yeah.
I would fold into this like part of art, just like there was the complexity thing on Variety. Part of art could simply be, I'm sick of these spindly little shits breaking off all of their limbs when they topple off the table because a Wraith is top heavy and is on a freaking 50 millimeter base now, which is an upgrade from the old 40 millimeter base that was like a third of the size of the Wraith, who has all his weight 6 inches above the base, but then shatters into a million pieces when it falls off the table.
That is a fair thing, especially with AdMech and those types of things.
AdMech's another one. Yeah, AdMech.
You accidentally look at the model incorrectly and it'll just shatter.
I feel bad about AdMech because I am not our AdMech player and I have broken multiple AdMech models.
Yeah. And it's like, fuck, dude, I'm sorry. I didn't even think I touched it.
I went to pick up the model and it had like 17 invisible objects coming off the top, all of which broke by the time my fingers stopped.
Yeah. So, yeah, I could definitely see some aspect of like, hey, this model's just irritating. I want a different art scheme. I want the different aesthetics that aren't going to be annoying to me, whatever they are. I mean, similarly to art, I would say is also just like the background lore aspects to the armies. Like,
very true.
I think that's one of the driving forces that a lot of people are going to have, especially as your second one, because you've been exposed to more.
Yes.
Just because you've been playing, so you've seen other armies. You've been talking to other people about like, oh, you know, what's your army actually trying to do, kind of stuff, and that just like exposes you to more of that, and you can be like, oh, that's really, really cool, kind of thing.
Yeah, and like you may have just read like, I don't know, Belisarius Call's book and be like, oh my god, Call is the coolest. And you could be wanting to go play AdMech suddenly because you want to, you know, build a Call or whatever.
Yeah.
I would say a more extreme reason to want a second army, but is still valid, is to play a different game. You could want to try out like Age of Sigmar or playing Necromunda because like that's what the guys at the local game store are playing and you want to join in and have people to play with. That's fine. That's a totally valid reason to have a second army. Maybe you're playing Bolt Action suddenly. Who knows?
Yeah, or what's the Blood Bowl, the football game?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's just really cool. And if like you see people playing, it's like, this is completely different, but still has some ideas that are similar.
This is going to be harder to give advice for specifically, but I think we can think of something for it. Alternatively, there's just the like growing in an adjacent army. This happens a lot with like an AdMech or a Imperial Guard player will buy an Imperial Knight because they can soup it easily and it's so cool and kind of thematic. And oops, I already own one Knight. Why don't I just own Knights as an army?
Yeah, that is a slippery slope, but it's also completely valid. Especially now, more and more, it seems like they're okay with having, especially like Knights, like you can soup a Knight pretty easily. It's like a thing that you can do.
Yeah, I'd say it ebbs and wanes, but it's more an excuse to get a second army. Like, we all know you secretly wanted that second army. You wouldn't have gone, oh, shucks, I just have to buy these Knights. I didn't want to, I swear, honey.
Yeah, I really didn't want to. It just happened, you know. They had a gun to my head. I couldn't do anything. It was me or them, and really I just had to buy it.
You said they had a gun to my head, and I heard they had a Gundam. I'm like, they're kind of Gundams.
That's Tau.
Yeah. So another reason you could want to try getting into your second army could be the depressing one, price/availability.
Yeah. It sucks to bring it up, but like it's a valid reason to pivot.
This is something that kind of happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess story time. I always thought Orks was cool. I wanted to play Orks. Got some Orks. Built a few of them. Couldn't find Orks anywhere. Like, just not possible to find them.
This was during COVID, and for those unaware, if you're not from America, over here in the States, during COVID and then followed immediately by COVID loosening up and then Brexit occurring, the UK just stopped shipping out Warhammer stuff. We would go like 10, 11 months with a model not being available in the US. And like you would end up with crazy prices on eBay for certain models if they were at all like meta at the time. It was miserable to get into a lot of armies.
Yeah, and like it was just one of those like I couldn't find the models, and I refused to spend that kind of money on eBay secondhand. I'm not doing that. I would play with a piece of paper instead of doing that.
Yeah, and we're talking about like mid 2020.
Right, and I just basically gave up on it. I was like, I can't build enough models to field an army. And luckily, Grey Knights was more available. And guess what my second army is? It's Orks, because they're available now, and I still think Orks are really cool.
So yeah, it's not a fun one to talk about, but like for some people it might just be, hey, my army ended up being too expensive for me, and I'm like only 1,000 points into it, and I'm looking at the next 1,000 going, there's no way I can play this, but my friends want me to play. And maybe it's more correct to go with like Space Marines or something that has a bunch of value boxes you can start stacking up, or tons of eBay deals.
That's the big thing with the pricing availability kind of thing, is if you're really on the budget, you're going to be looking for the deals. You're going to be looking for the mini swaps, the eBays, the Facebook marketplaces, the whatever Europe has. And just kind of like somebody's trying to get rid of their army. It's mostly complete or something like that. And it's just a great deal. Sometimes you just have to be like, yep, I still want to play. It makes sense. It's fun enough. I'm interested in it enough. It's not my first choice, but I still want to play. That's the best option at the moment for me to get into it.
Yeah. So there's one last reason, and it's got the easiest advice, so we'll use it as our pivot point here into advice. The last reason would be you're chasing the meta. The advice for that is, how are those Inceptors you just built?
If you want to get rid of any of your useless Inceptors, send them to the show.
There you go. P.O. Box in the show notes, and I guess it's not in the description because we would get spam bots, but if you go to the actual website, you can see it. There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, don't meta chase. This is not the hobby for meta chasing.
No, if you want to meta chase, like here's a real piece of advice for you. If you're the type of spike who cannot deal with being bad, right? Like you can't deal with your army not being good. The answer is not to constantly attempt to sell and buy armies. Or buy armies, never sell. That's also not the answer.
I was like, hold on, Brad. I feel like you're trying to justify your lack of impulse control.
Neither of those are the answer.
Okay, good.
The answer is stick to one army that has a healthy range to it. Yeah. Something large like Space Marines or Orks or Tyranids. Just a big army with a lot of range to it. Because you want to build one army, all of the options over time. Not all at once, dear God. But you can build up to the point where you've got every option available and you can play the best version of an army. That should keep you competitive for forever. Like, even in the worst case, you may go 6 months of being bottom tier trash AdMech right now. Whoever's going to end up worst in Arcs of Omen season, but you get the point. Outside of like 6 months where you may be actual gutter trash, there will always be some competitive build in your army.
Yeah. And I mean, on that, it's also one of those that, like, if you're actually trying to win, most of us have time commitments to other things. It's going to be substantially easier for you to get good at one army, all the different aspects of that army, but one army, and just get good at that. As opposed to, I'm just going to bounce around all of the whatever's current meta. It's not really going to work out well.
You will burn out and rage and be that guy story for other people.
Exactly.
Don't be that.
Don't be that. That's our advice.
Okay, so into advice proper for all the other ones. Let's take a moment. We're going to cover all the easy ones. We'll save our big variety one for last. It's a long answer.
Yeah.
So first off, universal reminder, if you're concerned about starting up a second army and abandoning your first one, you'll almost always come back to it. I've bounced around my armies a ton. My Necrons, notorious shelf sitters. Because the rules were written like one-page rules, and we're trying to play 40k here.
Got him.
I still came back. I added more to the shelf because I love them, even if they're constantly disappointing to play. One day, my loyalty will finally be rewarded. I've added another few thousand points to my half-finished demons. I started getting into a real corn kick leading up to the new demon codex, and it honestly kind of worked out in my favor. Thank you, Total War 3 and Scarbrand being amazing.
Yeah, I was like, it was kind of interesting that you got into that kick, because that's not exactly what I was like. You're Zeech.
I have never liked corn before, but Total War 3 and Scarbrand just clicked with me.
Dude, Scarbrand is so cool in that game.
That's why I got my Scarbrand model, baby.
It's such a fun play.
I got into a corn kick, and now I'm kind of happy I did, because by going that direction in that army, I have something in that army that's actually in a good spot that I don't feel sad playing.
Yeah.
So you'll come back to armies you haven't finished. I have not finished a single one of my knights, as I talked about at the beginning of the episode. I've added on to that army already, because the new Knight Codex came out with the new War Dogs and the new Abominant, so I bought that new intro box twice.
Jesus.
It was good value, goddammit.
You know, you'll never give up the Magic the Gathering soul of, it's just good value.
I know. Dude, EV is printed into our very essence as Magic players. It will never leave us.
You spend a decade just focusing on that, and it'll never leave.
Dude, it was 2 for 1. How can you say no to a 2 for 1?
Yeah, that's it. I'm honestly surprised that you didn't get like sucked into like Kohl's or something like that with all of their sales.
No, I don't fit in anything in Kohl's. Have you seen me?
Have you seen all of me?
You may need a telescope.
Earth curves around a little bit, so, just be careful.
All I'm saying is I am suing for use of my image in the Great Unclean One.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, I talked about how I tried doing orcs. I actually sold them off.
Yeah, like, it was one of the first things I mini swapped. Was I got rid of your orcs for you, your Gaz and Knobs or whatever the hell you had, the like one box set that existed.
I forget what else it was, but yeah, it was definitely Gaz.
It was the starter box thing that had Space Wolves on the other end, but that was like all we could get. Yeah, we ended up getting rid of that, and you ended up getting into Grey Knights.
Yeah, it worked out really well because the availability kind of worked, but it was one of those like, I am happy that I'm able to do orcs now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely back to it.
The point is, if you aren't liking your first army right now, it doesn't mean you won't like it later, necessarily. It's possible you hate it, but most likely it's just you're going through a troubled time with your army and you don't know if you really want to be playing it, shelf it. Try something else.
It's just a phase.
Yeah, and see if it is just a phase. Or if you just end up hating him forever and it's been 2 years since you touched him, you still hate the army, just get rid of it then.
Yeah.
You're probably 4 armies later if you're like me.
Or 6.
Shut
or
up.
Whatever insanity
Stop
you have.
counting.
Especially because there's like also the AOS part. But, you know, never mind. That's fine.
We're not counting the AOS armies. Those don't count. We're talking about 40k today.
Those don't count, indeed. Yeah.
I'm setting the rules on how you are allowed to shame me.
Okay, so art. Let's talk about the advice for art. Don't burn yourself out. That's my thing, because at least to me, I'm not very artistic. I didn't even do my Grey Knights. I paid Brad's wife to do it.
Oh, artistic. I was going to correct you. Never mind.
Yeah, funny. Haha. You're not wrong, but, you know. So, you know, it's one of those that, like, if you're going to make it an art project, just enjoy that part of it if that's what you want to do. Like, don't go crazy and, like, I'm going to spend 40 hours this week on this one model. Well, I mean, probably not a great idea.
Or it could be a great idea. It's just don't buy 2,000 points of models to start with if you're going to do that.
Yeah, that's okay. Fair enough. Yes. Do it with a character or two.
But if you want to try out the new airbrush you bought,
right,
or you want to try out oil shading instead of doing acrylic shading on your next models, then you're probably fine going in a bit deeper if that's what you're experimenting with, is some type of speed painting thing. One thing I would warn, though, is if you're like getting into it because you're really wanting to paint a specific art piece, like let's say we go back to the lore person who wants to do Belisarius Call because they just read the great work. If that's you, or you read Dawn of Fire even, also pretty good. But if that's you, maybe you just want to paint Call. You're allowed to have a model. It doesn't have to turn into an army.
That is true. There are like set pieces kind of thing where it's just, this is going to sit on a shelf. It's going to look really, really cool.
Yeah. You can play, you know, Necrons or whatever, and just own that model that you really liked and wanted to paint. Bellicor is a sweet model. You don't have to play demons to want to paint Bellicor. I get it.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, if it's one of those that like you really want to paint Bellicor, cool. If you're also kind of interested in that army, then you don't really need our advice. Just go try it, see what happens. Like, it's okay.
But like, comment, subscribe before you leave.
Wow. Wow.
Gotta crank those numbers up, Eric.
Yeah. So on the art part, it's also one of those that like, not just the project itself, there's also the techniques. So I really have enjoyed doing airbrushing.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like invigorated me to even doing the painting portion of this hobby. And honestly, I don't know if I would be as excited to do orcs if I didn't try out airbrushing and really enjoy it. Similarly, you're talking about like oil. Going back to contrast, you wouldn't know that until you tried a new thing.
Mm-hmm. I think art is a really good reason to want to branch into a second army. I say this as someone who has done it at least once. Kind of twice if you count knights.
I wouldn't count knights for you, but sure.
It was my original intent. It's just I'm failing the execution.
It was the intent was there.
I guess 3 now that I just bought into Gene Stealers, but
right.
That one has a much better chance than Knights to actually get done in a timely manner because, well, it's going to be a really long project, but to have anything done of it is probably going to be faster because I have a plan and already bought bits to kit bash what I want to do art-wise with them.
Yeah, I was going to say, you do actually have a plan. You've been posting all kinds of stuff.
I was working on this for like actual weeks now.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's for a different topic. And that's why your wife should never leave you unattended without adult supervision for a week, because you come home with a different army and now you're going to have to explain to her, no, I've always had those boxes, honey. Don't look over there.
Quick, take them to your brother. They're his, I swear.
Hide them in the basement.
Don't look at the credit card.
We 3D print a lot of crap in our playgroup. Like,
Oh, yeah.
my brother has 3 3D printers in his basement. One of them is even functional.
3 is a bit of a stretch. Technically, I suppose.
We've got a lot of 3D prints in our playgroup. We use them for bits. We use them for entire models, especially when it's a fine cast piece of garbage. Or Forge World. I will never buy Forge World again. If you are having issues with the price of something, it is possible 3D printing is a cheaper solution than going whole hog and buying 4,000 points of models to fill out an army.
Also, that does bring in an entire another aspect to this hobbying, this going for another army type thing of you could do the modeling.
That's true.
I have a plan going on with my orcs right now. I've got Blender. I'm filling some stuff out. I'm going to be printing my own custom designed model. And I'm like super excited for it because I'm not good at it. I'm spending a lot of time on YouTube and figuring out the donut tutorial. But
I love the donut tutorial. It's a timeless classic.
it really is. But, you know, it's another one of those, like, if you're interested not maybe in the exact models, well, maybe you're interested in the lore, but you want to have your own take on it. That's cool, man. If you have availability of a 3D printer, you've got Blender and YouTube, you got time, it's fun, man. It can be definitely fun. There's also the timely, like, value boxes, like the Christmas value boxes and stuff like that. If you get a chance to get one of those, it could be one of those, like, it makes sense that you were able to get it and you're excited for it and that kind of stuff. So it's very nebulous to look at, but, you know, these are things to look into, and, you know, it's all going to depend on what your budget and style you're looking for.
As for the new game one, I actually have some legit advice, I think. Figure out if you like a certain style of play that you want to experience in most of the games you play, or if you're looking to get variety in how you play depending on which game you're playing.
Yeah.
So, for me, a personal example would be my AOS armies. I love Hero Hammer. I love casting spells. I love big shit, giant splashy plays.
Dinosaurs.
Yes, because under my spike exterior lies an absolute Timmy.
Yeah, dude, dinosaurs are awesome. Dragons are cool. Like, just because you want to try and win at all costs doesn't mean that the 5-year-old kid in you isn't excited about seeing a dinosaur trample a person.
And if you think I'm not going to spend at least $1,000 on Seraphon models this year...
God.
Did you see the new Saurus Warriors? I just printed some, and these ones look 10 times better than what I printed.
It's not like you just bought Gene Stealer Cults. I mean, wait. Your brother just got Gene Stealer Cults.
It's a different game. I'm allowed to do it twice in 1 year if it's a different game. I already own Seraphon. It's not a new army. It's just me finishing an army that's sitting in my basement, primed and zenithalled.
Yeah, right.
We're talking about 40k today, though. We're not talking about my other problems.
Okay, fair enough.
But, for example, I really like that stuff. In AOS, I play Tzeentch Demons, partly because I already owned them for 40k, and I play Seraphon, which is the big dinosaurs riding dinosaurs army. Like, if Exodites ever become a thing in 40k, I will go broke.
Yeah, probably.
But it's possible you're looking for a change of pace, too. Like, let's say you've already been wizarded it out. You're playing Grey Knights or you're playing Thousand Suns in 40k, and you're like, I just want to smash face in a new game. I don't want to have to deal with 15-minute long hero phases and, you know, casting with Nagash or anything.
I just want to hit him with a club.
Exactly. And you're like, I'm going to get Iron Jaws when I get into when I get into AOS.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy the Angry Cabbage.
It is completely different, and that can also be very fun. You can also, for the new game type thing, you can just keep the same thing, like Orks and Orks.
Yeah, and again, that gets right into my I know what I like. I'm playing
Yeah.
Thousand Sons and Tzeentch Demons, then I'm playing Disciples of Tzeentch, and I'm playing Seraphon because I like the big monsters.
Yeah, so, it's fun to do different things. It's fun to do the same things in just different rule sets. You just gotta figure out what you're looking for, essentially, and there's gonna be options.
Yeah. And a big thing would be when you're looking at a second army, do not be afraid, just like with the first one, to try it out on like Tabletop Simulator or something. Or, just experiment with the army before you go buy into it and feel regret a second time. Because it's going to feel a lot worse having two armies you don't like. Tabletop Simulator could save a lot of your mental health.
That makes so much more sense. The notes were like, you just threw in TTS, and I was like, why is text-to-speech in this part of the show notes?
Because clearly they should go watch If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device to figure out their second army. Everyone is playing Thousand Sons, Custodes, and AdMech now. Shocking.
Yeah, no, I mean, it made sense to me in like a weird way, but I was like, shouldn't that be up in like the lore section and like a funny thing? But tabletop, got it. Not text-to-speech. Yes. I mean, also you could, if you're like able to find a local play group, you could just ask to play somebody's army for a night or two.
Yeah, or in a worst case scenario, put some blank bases down and just slide them around and pretend there's invisible units on top. They're painted purple. So let's get into the big one. This is the variety one. This is probably why you're here. It's a hard to answer question without context of where you started. So things that I think of is, what is the polar opposite of my army? And does that appeal to me? So like going through our personal experiences here, in our playgroup, everybody has two armies. A lot of people are working on a third, or at least have an AOS one they're also working on.
Yeah.
We all have an AOS one, actually. So, yeah, we all have two 40k armies, one AOS army, and some of us have more.
Some of us have more.
Shut up. And so, like, we'll anonymize our playgroup here, but player one started out as Death Guard. And when we were looking at...
I thought you were going to say Orks or Grey Knights, and I was like, wow, real anonymous, Brad.
I'm ignoring you. Yours is simple. We're not getting into that. He started as Death Guard. Stinky, slow, big fat guys. Super melee, super sit around not doing anything.
Yeah.
He wanted to expand out towards waifus because he has a big thing for nuns. So he wanted to go towards nuns with guns.
I'm not sure this is entirely accurate to story, but you know what? I'll accept it. He's not here to defend himself.
It's mostly accurate, and I'm on the internet, so I can say whatever I want. So we ended up getting him Adeptus Sororitas.
Yeah.
And so then he had his very frail girls who have their whole flamer thing. They've got a bunch of the redemptions? Redemptas? Man.
Something like that.
I have a podcast about this game. You think I can remember the name of the models?
There's a lot of models, dude. And a lot of them overlap, too.
All of the Imperium ones. What's the difference between an interceptor, an inceptor, an intercessor?
I always fuck that up.
But anyway, he's got his fast girls and he's got his fly girls who are ultra mobile, and it feels very different from Death Guard. Looks wise, also very different from Death Guard.
Very different, yeah.
Then we have our other player, we'll call him player 2. He had AdMech, and he, with AdMech, was like me with Necrons, and very much regretted his first army. For me, it was more, our rules just started to really show they sucked really quick. By like the second Codex's release, we knew. And I was kind of sad about that. But for him, his problem was AdMech is a very techie army. It is a mostly one-phase army. It's mostly shooting, but it has melee technically. Very frail. Very hard to play. Oh my god, the 9th edition Codex came out, and it was like watching a man die inside. He is not the type who enjoys Hero Hammer. He does not enjoy a 15-minute command phase.
Yeah, it didn't help that was his first army. Like, hey, let's give you one of the most complicated, convoluted things ever as your first army.
So we all got our heads together because he didn't tell us what army he wanted to go into. He just knew he wasn't happy. And we came up with what's the polar opposite of AdMech that someone wasn't already playing in our playgroup, because Grey Knights is one of my top picks, actually. But we came up with Space Wolves because they're a mostly melee army. They have access to everything, so he still gets to play in any phase if he wants to, including some Psychic, which he hadn't had yet.
Right.
It's a tankier army. Space Marines are, somewhat elite. It's a lot less technical at a base level. I'm aware you can go super deep into like strats if you're super into Space Wolves. He eventually got there, but the point is, it was a much easier learning curve.
The floor was not quite as low.
Yes, the floor and the ceiling are closer together in Space Wolves than AdMech. I think everyone is fine with saying that one.
And I think he actually just enjoyed painting that as well.
Yeah. Oh man, he is our best painter too.
Oh yeah, by far.
Oh my god.
It's also amazing to see what he's done with like shit quality tools.
His quality of tools to do the job is kind of proof that you can replace bad tools with high skill.
Yeah.
So we went that way with him, and it was a huge win because it solved all the problems in his army. And that's kind of my like example in abstract of what you want to be looking for if you want variety. Think about what your army does or is that annoys you, and look for armies that are not that.
You've got some experience. You know what you like, you know what you don't like. Find stuff that doesn't have as much of it that you don't like.
My wife's was really easy. Hers was just art based, so I can't really get into the variety one there. She liked Tyranids, and then she got into 40k a bit more with us, found Tau and went, oh man, I like these guys too. And that's her armies. My path was, I started with Necrons. I hate a lot of little things about Necrons. They're not a bad starter army, but they have a terrible codex, and you have to be aware of that fact. They had an even worse codex in 8th, so I went from really garbage to got my 9th edition codex and was now just about tied with everyone's 8th edition codexes.
And then you realize that it wasn't just Space Marines being super special and being so much above everybody else.
Yeah.
It was just 9th edition was different.
Shortly after the Necron Codex came out, I had already moved into Chaos Demons as a second army, kind of like a pivot.
It was very much you didn't know what you were doing at the time, and Chaos Demons looked kind of cool, so you'd pick a few of them up.
Yeah, and I was flailing around. A large chunk of my original Necrons are actually a purchase I made on Miniswap and met the guy in Flint, Michigan in a parking lot while we're both wearing masks. And I'm like, man.
That was so fucking sketchy, dude, when you told me about that afterwards.
This is like the dumbest thing I've ever done. I didn't even think about it until it was over. I'm like, I'm sure I'm glad that guy showed up with his 6-year-old, and I was the more scary threat there than him.
With cash, expecting plastic in return instead of, a gun and asking for all of my money.
Yeah, with cash in hand.
Idiot.
So, maybe that wasn't the smartest move in my life. So I ended up into Chaos Demons mostly through secondhand stuff and fixing that up. It is the one where I first started to learn about kit bashing, and I really enjoyed separating my Nurglings out to make more Nurglings just by using the kit differently than it said on the instructions. That was fun, but it was kind of short-lived because I was like, they're fine, I like them, they'll probably be one of my long-term armies, but I want to play 9th edition.
Right. And there was no expectation of Chaos being anytime soon.
No. And Drukhari just got announced. And I was like, that was one of the armies I originally was looking at with Necrons. When I was like debating for my original army, it was like, do I want to play Drukhari, Covens mainly?
Right.
But I didn't really like the whole range. And I got some good advice back then, which is make sure you like the whole range, because you're going to be sad if you only like a third of an army and it's not good for 2/3 of its existence.
Right.
But I was like, I'm just going to bite the bullet and try Drukhari, whatever. And there were like a billion available at the local store because it's like one of the only things that was ever in stock.
Yeah, that was kind of weird, but it worked out.
So I got into Drukhari, and I also at that time had got my first 3D printer, which now lives in my brother's basement destroyed as he has ruined it.
It put up a valiant fight.
It did. I did more damage to it. He's going to listen to this episode and be like, you told them I broke it. You did so much terrible shit to that thing.
He's going to be like, you gave it to me basically broken. It was only technically working.
I had to replace the FEP 2 minutes after I got it from you, you shit. But that ended up being like my experiment with first trying something that would end up with a good 9th edition codex, though I didn't know it when I started. But second, and more importantly, it was my first art experiment army, basically, where I was like, I want to learn how to 3D print anyway. And Drukhari has some bad sculpts, I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of old shit in there.
Just a couple.
My grotesques are definitely not fine cast. I'd also go broke if they were.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, it worked out.
So I did that with Drukhari, and that was my pivot there. And that's kind of where I settled for the first half of the edition. My brother started off with Thousand Suns just as like his first experiment before quickly changing over to mostly playing Space Marines and Custodes and forgetting he owned a random start collecting of Thousand Suns.
You know, I actually forgot that that's how that happened.
Yeah, it is. Because I had Chaos Demons and I was playing Tzeentch Demons a lot. And I was like, man, I want to soup Thousand Suns with my Tzeentch Demons, which is one of those great examples of a pivot where you have Army A and you kind of want to get into Army B, and then, oh crap, I like this one more. So I ended up stealing his start collecting box so I could soup. And then I ended up just building up more Thousand Suns and ending up going from souping Thousand Suns into Tzeentch Demons to just, I play Thousand Suns. We got a codex in 9th and it was good. And everything was written like the person who wrote the codex liked the army and understood what an army full of casters should look like. Now, the codex is not flawless. There's tons of internal balance issues, but at least core rule-wise, it's something I enjoy.
Yeah. So your brother didn't even really care about the Thousand Suns, was good with Space Marines and Custodes.
He mostly was just happy I was giving him $60. And he didn't have to go on mini swap.
Yeah.
And then Chaos Knights was just randomly me drunk on eBay.
Brilliant.
And then since I had a couple nights, the new codex came out and I was like, I've already got a couple of them and this box is sweet value. I'll just buy 2 of it and sell an extra book and data cards on mini swap. And that's what I did.
Yeah, you've got a problem.
That's how I ended up with Knights. And now Genestealer Cults is my sweet new army idea. So that's some long stories of how you can do different pivots that I can't give you perfect examples.
It's just one of those that there's so many variables involved in it that these are just examples. You can bounce ideas off your friends, your play group, YouTube comments. That's cool, but like at the end of the day, it's just something that you're going to have to figure out.
And I would say, like, I'm not just shilling here. This is not a joke. This is not a like, comment, subscribe moment. But legitimately, if you're on our YouTube watching this episode, go down in the comments if you actually have a, hey, I have Army A, I like this about it, I don't like this about it, and I'm torn between these couple of Army Bs to be my second army. And then people can actually give proper advice to each other.
Right.
Because it is one of those things where I'd love to give you easy answers. I'd love to break out a flowchart and just go, here's how you do it, done. But it takes a lot of context to give that answer.
Yeah, the flowchart would either be useless or it would just be funny, put it together in paint. I mean, I love those from Path of Exile seasons, but they're not particularly useful when somebody's looking for actual information.
Choose my league starter.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually help each other in the comments. We'll try to give some advice on and off as I check back. But I do hope this episode helped you if you were making some internal struggle.
I'm also going to, before we head out, be the little voice in the back of your head saying you don't have to get a second army.
Do it.
It's okay to just have one. If you really like it, it's okay.
Do it. You won't.
Wow. So this is a guy with 8 armies.
It's not 8. It's only 6. We're not counting AOS right now. It's only 6.
I was like, I think that's just blatant lie.
Don't correct me.
Sure, man. Let's go look at your pile of shame and figure out what you actually have and what you don't.
I at least build and prime my models. The problem occurs when it gets to the actual painting steps, where once they're primed, I'm like, I can play this without feeling too much shame now. It's zenithaled, you know? Like, it looks fine.
It looks fine. It's, it's just...
It's in grayscale.
It's grayscaled in deep shadows.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It was an artistic choice.
It's extreme Blanchitsu. You wouldn't understand.
I guess on that we can end it.
Yeah. Let's get out of here.
Sounds good.